I'm a film programmer at the American Cinematheque, also the founder of one of the AC's festivals, Proof, which is Proof of Concept Film Festival. So super excited to talk about genre today, one of my favorite kinds of films, and all of these creepy little films that you all have here tonight. So thank you all for being here. And yeah, let's dive into it. So we have a little clip show here tonight where you all have curated some clips. So would love to go down with each of you and talk about the film as well as the clip that you curated tonight and why you did so. So let's get into it. JD.
Good. I was like, let me get my thoughts together.
Yes, we'll start over here. JD, we have a lot of debuts here tonight, but your film Sweetheart was actually your second feature film that you directed, had Jason Blum and Blumhouse attached, distributed by Universal. So tell us about your foray into horror and why you chose this clip today.
Yeah. Hey, guys. What's up? Sweetheart was my first time taking a swing at something in the horror space, and the clip that I chose was because that's where the whole idea for the movie came from. I didn't have like any character or location or like theme or why did I want to make I had none of that. I just thought like, oh, it'd be really scary if this thing happened in a movie, and then spent a year and a half figuring out how to put a story around that. So that's what the clip is.
Amazing. And with Sweetheart, was there anything that was like really drawing you to like horror, thriller, suspense that you were like, any inspirations that you're pulling from there?
Not to have an annoying answer, not really. I was just so terrified of. So I love the ocean, and I have like a really unhealthy obsession with it, and I'm terrified of it, and I swim in it, and I think about it all the time, and I'd happily only make film and television about the ocean from here on out, but unfortunately that's not how my career is shaping out. But this thought to make this film really just came from like an image, and it's for me it's like what I love about Sweetheart is that it just reminds me across my very young career, just like you never know where the thing is going to come from that makes you want to make it. And sometimes it is like a big theme, and sometimes it is like a character that you love, and sometimes it is an issue or a topic or a real person in history. But this was really simply like, oh, just as like a filmmaker, that image I am drawn to. And Sweetheart really was just an expression of trying to bring that to screen.
For sure. Thank you. Mimi, you're a director with a background in choreography, yes. And you have a really amazing music video background with a variety of artists like Vance Joy, Sylvanesso. So tell us a bit about your directorial debut, Fresh, and what made you pick the clip that we're going to see shortly.
I think I know which clip it is. I believe it's kind of a moment in the movie right before the movie kind of turns. So if you've seen the film, it's kind of, it starts out in one way and then it kind of does a big switch. So it's the scene leading up to that switch, basically. It's kind of a nice sort of tense scene.
Totally. And were there any like themes or also like inspiration that you were pulling from with Fresh, and you made your first foray into horror as well, or horror, thriller, suspense? A lot of fun things.
Yeah, I was never really a horror film buff. But I'm, been put in that category with this film, which I'm very pleased to be put in that category. I'm honored. I feel like I let people down when I'm like, but I think what was fun for me is kind of taking on a more genre film from a background that wasn't that way, and just like, what's my take on this story, and what's my take in terms of how I'm going to build the tone for this film, and how can I make it, uniquely mine, and in a weird way, because I wasn't that like well read in horror. I think that helped me in kind of a way, because I wasn't trying to like compare or do something that had been done before, so I didn't really have a roadmap. It was me sort of shooting from the hip.
Oh, wow, you did an amazing job. Awesome, thank you, Mimi. And Patrick, you wrote, directed, shot, and acted in your directorial debut, Creep, which also stars Kate Aselton and Mark Duplass. Also directed by Jason, or produced by Jason Blum. So tell us about the film and the creepy clip you chose today.
Sure. It's nice to know I'm not alone up here as someone who's literally just stumbled into the horror genre and is just kind of feeling around a dark room, trying to figure it out as I make movies. But Creep, when we set out to make this movie, it was a movie made with just me and Mark Duplass in a cabin together with a video camera. And we were improvising the entire thing. We had a 5-page outline that we were working off of, but otherwise it was just sort of an experiment in my mind, And this clip that you're going to see, comes at the first moment in the movie where I think, we've been spending this time in this cabin with these two guys, and we've sort of been like dancing on the edge of things getting weird to the point of being dangerous, and sort of this is the moment where the scales are tipped in that sense. So, it wasn't meant to be a horror movie when we were making it, and it wasn't until we got actually picked up by Blumhouse that they encouraged us to make changes to it that would make it more of a genre film, and thus made it a much better movie. I think in the long run, I felt very lucky to have that part of the experience. But this clip is, I think, important to the movie because it's this turn in the movie, but it's also, I think, important to me because it's literally, you're kind of watching me learn how to make a movie in real time, and also like realize that I'm making a horror movie in real time.
Amazing. Nikyatu. Nanny is your directorial debut and was also featured on the 2020 Blacklist, and also has Blumhouse affiliation.
I'm wondering if he financed this night.
Tell us about your film and your curated clip.
I love that I go last for this. I'm sure I'll go first for another question, but everybody had a morsel that really speaks to my process. So I love that I'm like rubbing shoulders with people who know what this is in so many facets. Nanny, unlike JD, took 8-ish years from conception to completion. So it was a project that wasn't consecutively 8 years of me pounding the pavement, but like writing and overthinking and the voices in my head telling me this was too specific of a story, that I wouldn't get the support for this. So it took a while because of life, for me. And I, like everybody else, well, unlike JD, but like Mimi and Patrick, my bad, Patrick. It's been I literally flew in today.
We just
I'm
met.
so
It's
sorry.
okay.
I kind of feel like I stumbled into horror as well because the filmmakers I admire are cross-genre, like Park Chan-wook. You have the permission in international cinema to be more than one thing. But in America, you very specifically have to be funneled into this thing. And I'm okay with the funneling of this into horror. So Nanny took a while. It found its way in terms of genre, definitely through the process of getting distribution and getting picked up by Blum. And I had some feelings around that because I was like, people are going to expect a certain film from a Blumhouse film, and this is not that. So I have to give it to Blumhouse for being brave in picking up Nanny. The scene that you're gonna see is kind of the culmination of my protagonist's internal navigation of her own demons. So it's the externalization of that. And to me, when we face our fears and our shadows, like that's a horror sequence inherently. But I also love the elements like JD. I'm obsessed with water and the sea and the depths. I think outer space is actually an allegory for the sea. And I've read from writers who think that as well. And I'm like, I'm not crazy. Because there's so many, it's so depthful, and we don't know so much about the sea. I have a lot of reverence for water, and I deal with spirits and African mythology that deals with fire and water, so different elements. And so this sequence utilizes those elements to explore a horror sequence that is the externalization of Aisha's internal struggles.
Well, thank you all for giving us a little precursor to your work. And let's play the clips and let's get into it. Let's dive into some of your craft and your process and how some of these were made as well, because we all know that every movie is a miracle. So let's get into it. So what drew you to genre in the first place? Some of you touched on this, and why did you kind of choose to thrill audiences? Let's start with Nikyatu.
I'm psychic. Last part of the question, why did you choose to?
It's kind of thrill audiences.
Oh,
the way that
thrill.
you just did.
That's subjective based on some of the reviews. I aimed to thrill audiences, and I mean, I think that I'm attracted to our shadow selves. I'm attracted to the truth. I'm not going to throw shade at LA. I promised myself I wasn't going to have LA jabs. But I think that making films in the New York microcosm allows you to confront truthfulness, in a really dark way inherently. And just the films that I gravitate to are very dark. And so when I first got to New York, I went to New York for NYU grad film, straight from undergrad. Went to Duke undergrad for this story I've told so many times. I always assume the audience has heard it, but I know y'all are like, I don't know who you are. So biomedical engineering undergrad, pivoted sophomore year at Duke University, and just went straight to NYU grad film. And when I moved there, I literally saw what was the core of Nanny. I saw mostly black and brown women pushing white children in the city, around NYU, around Tisch. And my mom had done this work. And I felt like domestic work, being a child of a mom who has done domestic work and been in different households where you experience wealth through your mother's work and you're worried about her constantly, to me, the genre that was organic to that was horror. I didn't want to tell a straightforward drama because also there are elements of the American quote-unquote dream that inherently feel like a horror for a lot of us every day. Not to get too dark, but as someone who is not afraid of that darkness, I really lean into that. And I also think just superficially as a Libra, it's fun to play with the tools of horror. Like you kind of get to...
You say you're not LA. Come on.
Zing.
Sorry, I had to.
I'm going to get you before the panel is over. Got me so good. No, I think just utilizing every tool in your arsenal as a filmmaker, you really get to do that with horror in terms of soundscape, in terms of mise en scène, like every facet of what is in the frame, color palette, costume design, you can just go ham. And as someone whose brain is constantly going ham, I love to play in genres where I can just utilize all the tools.
Yeah, I think that kind of made me think of my answer. I feel like coming from music videos and sort of like more experimental, sort of abstract dance film, and I think, I didn't write Fresh. Lauren Kahn wrote Fresh. Shout out Lauren. She's not here. I don't think, Lauren. Yeah, I think that reading something that was so bold, it felt similar where I could kind of lean in with the tools that I did already have, which is like trying to express some visceral things through visuals and sound and all of the rest. So I think the genre just sort of like was a nice segue for me into long form narrative, just because I have the things I'm drawn to tend to be of the more guttural, visceral, kind of like tense, whatever it is, you name it. Like I want to like go all the way there. So yeah, I think I didn't choose genre. It kind of chose me. And it made a lot of sense in the end. But as I was doing it, I was like, I don't know if this is gonna work or not. I just have to lean into my instincts. So
Patrick, you talked.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also, someone who sort of came into this unexpectedly, where I was going to school for documentary and experimental filmmaking, and then coming out of school, made this relationship with Mark Duplass, and we were, trying to come up with an idea for a film to work on together, and I think it was actually Mark and his sort of instincts and sort of obsession with like whittling things down to its very core elements so that he can then control as much as possible and not have anyone sort of telling them what to do during the process. It really comes from him being a total type A psycho, which he plays in my movie as well. And so, it was out of those conversations that we sort of came up with this idea where we wouldn't need a crew, where it could just be me and Mark out there in the woods and a video camera doing this together, And I was somewhat familiar with like found footage movies. Like I'd seen Blair Witch Project, and my sort of OCD brain was very conscious while we were making this movie of like, there needing to be this justification of why the camera's on the entire time, and we can't, we have to like adhere to this conceit, through and through. There can't be any non-diegetic music, everything we're seeing has to be captured by the characters in the movie. And it was really great to have those. I love constraints as a filmmaker, but it was really great to have those constraints because it really, it not only influenced but also like challenged every decision I would make. It was like, okay, this feels like the greatest idea of what we could be doing next, but does it pass the test that we've set for ourselves? And through that, I was able to, explore this theme that I think I've been lucky. I make comedies as well. They're dark, weird comedies, but they're comedies. And I think, if there's a through line and all that stuff, it's, dealing with the discomfort of being around other people and trying to, figure other people out, which is kind of a horror movie at the end of that we're all living every day of our lives. And so, that's just like one of the elements that's so cool about making horror movies is that, it is this Trojan horse of a genre, whether it's like you're dealing with class issues or you're doing like sexual politics or whatever, like you can throw all these big, heavy, dark and real truthful themes into it, but then also get to be entertaining at the same time, So that's the thing that keeps me going and continues to excite me about making movies this way.
Totally. I love that. JD.
Yeah, I mean, I'd follow that a little bit by way of like, genre is always such a useful tool in being able to say something without saying it in caps, and I think even more specifically, like saying something while also having fun doing it. My love of genre is like entirely wrapped with, like feeling and world building. And, Sweetheart was my second movie, and the movie I made after that was like a period war drama. And while love the movie, your hands are tied in a really specific way, because when you want to move this, they're like, well, that didn't exist until 1952. So you got to go back. You're like, okay, when you do this, and they're like, that's from 1949. You're like, I actually, for this moment, like, don't care. And I want to lie professionally, like I do. And genre is such a great way to just tell whatever story you want to tell with, like, at least to me, the most autonomy, and I can touch on all of these things and play with all these things and, force people to think about this topic or this feeling in a way, but it's rewrapped with something that's actually like entertaining. So the shortcut to feeling and experience and my own sort of selfish desires to like build worlds, genre has routinely been the best path to do that.
Amazing. Nikyatu, you talked a little bit about the toolbox that this all like allows. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about creatively creating tension in your work, which I feel like is so masterfully done in all of these clips. So I watched here, like I heard like jumps and like ooh, which was exciting. So in your process, how do you all choose like what to show, what not to show, whether to put in a jump scare, whether to have music or not have music, as you were talking about, Patrick, and how does that? Well, I'll hit you with that question first. Whoever wants to jump in.
I'll start. I think it's also about the juxtaposition of scenes. So the ebb and flow. Do you have a scene that culminates in a lot of noise and a lot of sound for a reason, and then a hard cut to complete silence? Because silence is a sound, right? And silence sounds differently depending on the space. So a lot of it for me is never allowing the audience to get comfortable. Like always. And it's probably maybe we all need therapy. Some of you are seeing therapists, and good job for you. I'm still trying to find my person. But I think some of it is about me navigating my own anxiety and forcing the audience to experience what it feels like to be in my mind. It's chaotic. It's wild. And so sometimes it's jarring silence that is uncomfortable and tense because I'm not comfortable sitting alone with my thoughts. Because what are my thoughts saying? Versus just noise, whether it's score or diegetic sound or non-diegetic sound, whether it is like just really intense, not Foley, but sound design. I'm over here thinking like straddling post-production and actual terms that are poetic. But yeah, I think it's really about what is before and what is after. So it's not just about the isolated scene or the isolated motif. What style are you establishing? And so the people that have given me permission to be a little bit chaotic are filmmakers like Lynn Ramsey. And chaotic is a word that some might use another word, but I love the way, does anyone here love Lynn Ramsey? I was like, how am I going to phrase this question? She treats sound design as a character. She treats her soundscape as a character. And so I have been given permission from people like her and Usman Semben and Guillermo del Toro and Bong Joon-ho. Like the list is long, to really utilize every tool, but not dismiss sound and the juxtaposition of soundlessness and sound.
Amazing, yes. Anyone else want to talk about the toolbox?
Wait, what was the question again? Because my head is spinning. I'm like, yes. What is happening? Wait, tell me again.
Talking about creatively, creating that effective tension in your work, and what kind of things that you're thinking through as you're trying to achieve that.
I think, you were talking about like, what is it like to be in my head? I think a lot of the times, like, you can, in prep, you can kind of like come up with a plan for a scene or a series of scenes, and then you get there, or even after you shot in the edit, you're like, okay, whatever I thought was going to happen is not happening, and it is not hitting, and it is not working. And so you kind of do have to tap into your own psyche. And a lot of times for me, like any decision I make is coming out of like a gut, sort of like, yes, no, this, that. And the moment I get far from that, I feel lost. So for me, it's all about always tapping back with myself, because if we're the sort of purveyors of these stories, it's really like kind of I take it very seriously that it's my obligation to let it funnel through me. So I think really like my body, my thoughts, like those are the tools. It's like I have to stay kind of like almost like in fighting shape for that, so that I can be kind of creatively strong. And so I think for me, because I didn't do technical film school, but I have done every job on set, it's about like, am I armed with the information I need to do my job and be able to communicate to the different amazing artists I'm working with of what I'm thinking, because sometimes it's hard to articulate. But also, am I checking back in with what I am feeling, what I am seeing, and if that comes in the way of like, no, I want this scene to go on longer, and I'm sure you guys can attest, like, you will have people around you the whole process going, nah,
Yeah.
and you go, yeah, no, we're gonna go longer. Like you have to like start to be comfortable saying the thing that no one else thinks is right in the room, and so I think it's a lot about just your being comfortable with those internal chaotic voices or thoughts, and being comfortable kind of communicating them to allow them to come onto screen. And when it does happen and you get that like that channel, it's like you can feel it, and it's just like the best, like watching that scene when the monster came out, like I was like, oh, that was in him, and so right,
Was that a
like,
nightmare that you had?
I just you can
Was it?
feel it when you
JD's
feel an
like-
auteur, when you feel that those moments on screen where only that person could have done that combination of things and that timing and that flavor. It's like, yeah, that's it.
Definitely.
Oh, I was going just to, because I so agree with both of what you guys both said. What I've had to remind myself of is that challenge to maintain the integrity of your feeling. Like I used to just think was a writing thing, or it was just a directing thing, and then I realized like, oh, it's actually every day from the moment you have the idea until there's a print master of the damn movie, because there's so many parts of the process where that's challenged, and sometimes it's even challenged by yourself, and you have to kind of go back and like Jay-Z says, remember your first song. Like it's about the purity of that original idea. And it's funny, I haven't seen. I saw the clip from Sweetheart like 3 days ago because I was like, let's do this clip. But before that, I hadn't seen it in a long time. And what I was reminded of, even sitting here, was how hard I had to fight that there was no music in the movie whatsoever until that moment. And the idea was like, oh, well, like it's a survival film. There's no fucking music here. Like there's nothing. But then when that moment occurs, you can kind of coach the audience into being like, it is a horror movie now, but like you're allowed to have fun, and that's why there's like an 80s synth-led kind of. It's like that's also not what you're expecting. But I knew that in prep, and I knew that in production, and then people start yelling at you in post, and you're like, this was a good idea 7 months ago to me. And obviously, you got to know when to like let go, but also there are the things that are your movie. And that, not to make it sound so contentious, but it is kind of like an assault every day. Like you have to fight that thing all the time.
We were talking about war, peacetime, and wartime. Amazing. And if Patrick,
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you guys are saying, and I overstand everything you guys are saying, and especially I think what Mimi was saying about listening to yourself and like sort of making your intuition be your guide throughout this whole process is just so important, because it's very easy, especially like having made my first movie with 2 people and then my last movie with hundreds of people, it's very easy to get lost in the fog of that, and the fog of all these voices, and remind yourself that you're the one that's needing to sort of guide those voices along and listen to your vision. But in following that intuition, it's not. I think for me, it's not like it's not saying, well, this is what the movie was supposed to be when I first thought of it, so this is what it's got to be at the end. For me, it's saying, okay, this is now at each stage. Now we're at the result of all these decisions that we've made. So here's the best choice I can make at this given time. So when I'm making the movie's already cast. We're on set. We're shooting it. We've prepped as much as we can, but inevitably, it's not what you expect. It's saying, okay, what's the best choice I can make now? Same in the editing room. Same in the sound mixing stage, and then by the time you're premiering your movie, you're fucked and you can't make any decisions anymore.
totally. You all kind of already answered my the second part of my question, which was this shift of how those visions might change from the script and storyboarding to production to then the editing and the cutting room floor. So if no one else has anything to add onto that point, which I think you all hit, let's talk about budget. We don't have to get into numbers, of course, but creating your first film or even your second film, odds are you're not going to have like a ton of money, not like Marvel level or any of that. So you're shooting with limited funds, and how does that affect your creativity, your shot list, your setups, visual effects? Who wants to speak on that?
Traditionally, what was your budget is like top 3 worst
like asking your
Q&A questions. But I love this
age.
because now we can kind of break through it, and you know, it's how much of your film was improvised and
together.
what was your budget. I mean, I'll start with that movie. I mean, our budget for Creep was, I think, you know, maybe $10,000 or less, you know, because it was a
When did you make it? The context is important.
yeah, context is important. It was 2014. We didn't have a crew, and it was just us in a cabin making a movie, you know, and it was and the conceit was that the characters in the movies are filming each other.
Yeah.
So, you know, that was the only. It's such an anomaly. That's the only way that can exist, you know. And I got to say, making a movie that way with that budget was just as, if not more difficult than making a movie for Netflix for $20 million, you know, 7 years later.
More money, more problems.
Exactly.
I have a
Jay-Z
question about that,
again.
too.
But it was cool because like those budgetary limitations became a challenge, and in how are we going to, you know, do what you were talking about before? It's like, how are we going to get the job done in terms of like making this feel scary and tense and everything. And because we shot it the way that we did, you know, once we were picked up by Blumhouse, we were able to test the movie and do screenings, and then go back and reshoot scenes in the movie. And we did that over the course of a year, which felt like a humiliation exercise. And during that whole process, I was having to like explain to my girlfriend at the time, now wife, that like, no, it's going to be great. I just have to go back one more time. It's the 17th time we've gone back to shoot a jump scare, but we're going to get it this time, you know. But once again, that's like the most, like, you can't do that with a normal movie.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure that what you all created already allowed you to go back and do like so many test shoots, and they're like, yeah, go back in the woods again with the camcorder.
Yeah, go back, you crazy. Go back, guys.
With the wolf suit.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, something I have been thinking about a lot, just because our business is dying.
Jesus, this panel.
You guys
is
knew
not
that,
just
right?
about my mental health.
Yeah.
You guys knew what you
At
were
all.
signing
Wait,
up for,
sorry,
right?
y'all.
Sorry,
It's
I heard
doomsday.
yesterday. I don't know. No. You know, I jest. But you know, I had this weird experience with Sweetheart was my second movie, but the movie I made prior was a movie we shot for like $250,000 in Los Angeles, and like months before, I was on the biggest set I've ever been on in my entire life, working for JJ on Force Awakens, and they had 3 more zeros at the end of their budget, and the thing that like kind of broke my brain, and it was a really important piece of like demystification, is like, yes, more money, more problems, but that which is very true, but in a funny way, it's like that's about everything but like what's in the little 16:9 monitor you're looking at. But once you're in that chair and you're looking at that monitor, it doesn't matter if there are like 500 stormtroopers in the way and they need to move like 2 degrees camera left, or if it's like a little candle on the table that you're shooting. Like, it all kind of focuses back to the decision you make trying to fit your story into that frame. And I just remember being very like freed by that, because it didn't matter if I had a lot of money or a little money. It's like the fact that I was here today, like sitting in a super uncomfortable chair, like overworked and tired, and looking at a dim monitor. Like it's the same thing, and I can look at that across, you know, the couple of movies and the television, and you're like, oh, well, once you get to that point, and you call, you know, not you, but someone calls action, and the camera starts, and you're looking at that frame, yeah, Do you call action? We'll
Who
talk about
called
that.
action?
Yeah, I don't think I ever have.
I
The
do.
movies
I don't
promise
know
me
Never?
to call
the
action.
actors
Oh,
are supposed
wow,
to
the
know,
power.
but I call action.
I've got people for that. But yeah, it's like the work is the work, and it's right there, no matter at a certain point how much money you have.
True.
Many caveats to that, but generally, that's
True, many caveats. So I want to supplement that in saying context again is important. My first feature, I got the financing for at the peak of COVID in 2021, and so at that time, no one was like people were getting shut down left and right because if you get a positive test in Zone A, which is, you're above the line and your actors and your DP, your production is shut down. So going up for my first feature with that additional pressure of COVID added not only a 20% contingency to my budget, literally, because you have a COVID department now, you have to have one for insurance purposes. But literally every weekend or every couple of days, you could have someone who ends up shutting down your entire production. So I'm not going to say our budget.
No, you
This is being recorded. But it was under 10. It was under 10, and we shot in New York City proper. At some point, we talked about shooting in Toronto, cheating Toronto, but you can always tell it's Toronto. I mean, so we ended up shooting on location in New York, peak of COVID, 20% additional to the budget that we already scraped by for. Had no distribution deal built in. So there were a lot of variables around my shoot that added a certain financial pressure that was not just theoretical and was not just about passion. But passion does take you through it. And so, yes, as JD said, when I sat in front of that monitor or I engaged with literally, I had the luxury of choosing my department heads and they chose me in return. All of those elements and then my actors, like choosing all of my first choices and them choosing me in return and then executing this thing carried me through because shooting through COVID definitely, and we're still in it. It's not over. It's still here. You still are at the mercy of it in terms of production. You still cannot have too many positive tests on set. You can still get shut down. So it's a very real, variable in the process, and it does add to your budget. Literally, it adds 20 to 30% to your budget to have a COVID department. So it's a very real conversation, depending on when you were allowed to make your first feature versus making your first feature in the mud of that. Like, I feel like it's only up from here. If I can make my first feature in a pandemic, let's go.
I also had a similar situation. My project was greenlit in August 2020. And I won't repeat all the things she's saying are completely true. And it's very scary when you're getting your first shot to then have all this other stuff where you're like, each day you're like, oh, wow, we got through another day, no positive tests. That's like becomes a part of your thought process that wouldn't normally. Ours, we shot in Canada, so the borders were closed. We had to quarantine. But it also meant that I wasn't allowed to bring anyone from the United States for crew. So I had to work with completely new people, people I'd never met before. And that was terrifying too. And the reason why it was terrifying mostly is because I actually got a pretty decent budget for my first feature. It was a studio film. Totally not what I expected to have happen, but happened. And Mary Parent at Legendary just really believed in the script, and she bought it in a day. So it was a pretty amazing thing, but that just meant all the pressures just kept mounting for my first feature, especially being in a pandemic, in another country, having a decent amount of money, doing my first long form. I mean, you name it. It was first. And so it was just like my MO, and I take this from Adam McKay, who produced Fresh, is he just says take everything 2 days at a time. you can deal with what's in front of you. You can deal with today. You can think about tomorrow. But beyond that, it's all going to change, especially in making a movie. So just focus. And if you get this grand view of everything, like, you're not going to be able to manage it. It's too many things to think about. So you just have to, like, check in, be grateful, and, like, the money, I totally agree with you. It's like once you're sitting on set and you're seeing what's happening, regardless of the scale of it, you have one job. So, yeah. But, yeah, money helps and hurts.
Definitely. Thank you. I do want to take a little turn here and just talk about just the landscape of genre and horror and thriller and suspense and all that. I feel like it's opening up. There's a lot more work from diverse voices in it, such as the amazing woman here. Horror and thriller and suspense are becoming less of boys' clubs. So if either of you want to speak to that, or any of you want to speak to that, of kind of exciting things that you're excited about in the genre and in the space, please do.
I'm excited about getting greenlit.
Yes.
No, let me stop. I honestly, Final Girl, I think the Final Girl is widening up even. Y'all know what the Final Girl means in a horror? Some people do. I'm treating y'all like my students. I'm sorry. I teach as well. So I'm in academia. I teach filmmaking. So the Final Girl is the last woman standing at the end of a horror film, literally. And I think that's even broadening up. So I love that we're rethinking what it means to be the person who lives at the end of the film. Because we all know the tropes that exist in horror, who dies first, who usually is a throwaway character. So repivoting the lens to people we typically don't see centered in these genres is literally my goal in terms of building my canon. And so, yeah, I think that's exciting, seeing other people engaging in that type of work.
Yeah, I think, like, it just, you can feel it opening up more. And so, like I said before, like, each one of us has a unique way of processing things. And so just to have more versions of that is really exciting, because it's like we're going to see things that we haven't seen before and experience cinema in a way that's, like, unique to that director. And that's just, I think there's room for everybody, and there should be.
For sure. Amazing. So something that some of you touched on that was really interesting is the more money, more problems kind of thing. And everyone here is because of your amazing work, is rising in terms of budget level and popularity. So what is that like, adjusting? Maybe I know you were thrown into the fire in a lot of ways. What is that like, adjusting as you're like pursuing more projects and such? I think we were having a conversation with some of you about that earlier. More budget, more bigger crews, more cooks in the kitchen with studio involvement and such. What is that like? What could you kind of tell yourself before to maybe prepare for it?
I mean, I think I've gotten really lucky because I've sort of, each of my movies has sort of been able to gradually rise in budget, but not too much that it's like I'm all of a sudden in the complete deep end of the swimming pool and I have no idea what I'm doing. You know, it's risen enough that I'm just, I have enough new tools that I'm actually aware of all these new tools, and I'm doing my best to try to access them and use them to the best of my ability. I mean, my second movie that I made after Creep, our budget for that was around $100,000, right? And so that was like
Times 10. Fast math.
Oh yeah, moving on up. But it did feel that way because I was like, oh, I have a producer and I have actual actors. I'm not having to act in the movie.
And hold the camera.
What is this? Yeah, and hold the fucking camera. What is this new world that we're in? And so, but I gotta say, with each gradual, step up in budget, with more sort of ostensibly more opportunity involved, it's definitely come with me having to sort of be aware of and not delude myself in terms of like why I'm getting more money to make the movie that I'm making. My last movie was a movie I made for Netflix. And it was an amazing experience. They gave me a lot of leeway creatively. They let me cast who I want. They let me shoot the movie with these old vintage lenses that blew 7 out of 10 takes, but the movie looks cool. You know, they were able to and they were super supportive collaborators, but they're also like a tech company that happens to fund movies. And at the end of the day, I'm getting notes that are literally coming from an algorithm, you know, and so, you know, but I knew that going into it. That was the sort of price that I paid walking into that experience. And so for my job as a director, it was like, okay, how can I, you know, like access that, like make the best movie that I can possibly make, knowing that I'm also trying to make a product that's going to be seen by the most amount of people at the same time. And so I don't think those things have to be mutually exclusive, you know? And so I think it's, you know, part of my job to find the balance, you know, when you get more money to make stuff, if that happens.
Awesome. Well, I would love to be selfish and ask more questions, but I'm going to open up to the audience. So get your questions ready. We'd love to hear from you. Any questions that you have for the panelists during that?
That's such a good question.
Yeah, during that long
You have to
process
repeat the
for Nanny.
question.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I'm being a director.
Do you,
I'm not, you.
during the 8-year process, what did you kind of like hold on to and let go of during that for Nanny?
Great question. You sacrifice a lot. And I actually wanted to supplement Patrick's response because it also is partly part of this response to you. So much of being a working writer, director in this industry, or just a filmmaker in this industry, is compromise and deciding what compromise you are willing to make. Money is not free. It's never free, especially in a capitalistic system. And so we all know that the more money you get, the more people you are answering to, the more people's opinions you are listening to. And so the luxury of developing this independently, and when I say developing Nanny over 8-ish years, I started writing this my first year of NYU. So there were no parameters. It was like I just knew I had to have a feature by the time that I graduated in terms of a feature screenplay. So I started writing it, and I didn't have anyone breathing on the back of my neck, and I didn't have any execs giving me notes based on Save the Cat. And I didn't, no shade to Save the Cat. It's great for breaking the story for some people. But I didn't have anyone to answer to except for myself. So it was a great practice in building up my own internal compass, my own internal North Star, my own body of references, my own body of work that I could look to and say, you're telling me I can't do this, but these 10 filmmakers did this before me many years ago. So digging into the archives was something that I did a lot. Maintaining an arsenal of references, whether it was on Tumblr. I'm a Tumblr gal. Love Tumblr. Shot Deck is new, but you know, just figuring out how to keep track of the things that inspire you, whether they're in the industry or they're in other mediums of artistry. The heart of the story never changed. I can say that much. The pieces, the individual variables that, you know, the story was comprised of changed, but the heart never changed. My protagonist never changed, because also I'm not cheating, but it helps that it's loosely based on my mother. So it's a love letter to my mother. That's never going to, that center is never going to change. Which is why I always say that first feature, what carries you through for me is something that really feels visceral and innate, and a story that haunts you, that you have to tell.
Questions? Do you ever get scared watching your own movie?
Like as a director or as an audience member?
Audience member.
I get stressed. Is that the same?
Yeah, I was terrified watching Sweetheart tonight. I mean, do you mean literally scared?
Or the edit, or
I think he means literally.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't get actually scared, but I am overwhelmed with regret.
Existential.
Yeah, like that
Dread.
kind of scared I get often when I watch my work.
I usually black out. Does that count? Because anytime I watch or with, I mean, it's like the movie's suddenly over, and I go, "What happened?" Because it's just like my hands are just like super wet, and then I'm just like, yeah, that's scary.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, watching your movie with an audience is, at the same time, I think probably one of the most important tools you have at the stage that you can do that. Well, because you learn so much. But every time I do it, I remind myself of like a monk setting himself on fire or something, where it's like this is like pure ego death that I'm having to go through. But it's good medicine, you know.
I mean, sorry, can I ask a question real quick? Yes. When you watch someone else's movie, you're like, a movie. And then when you watch your movie, you're like, someone tried to make a movie.
Honestly, maybe I'm an outlier. I struggle to watch a lot of movies. I'm not like a cinephile. My mom is a cinephile. I feel like I became a filmmaker because I was gestating in the womb of a cinephile. I don't know. By proximity, I don't know. But movies all I see is the disparate parts of the movie. And then I'm like, what was that dog movie with the voiceovers? What is it called? The latest one? I looked up the budget.
Strays.
Yeah. Sorry.
I think that one thing that might be somewhat helpful for what you asked is when you do watch a movie, especially something that's a genre film with an audience, you notice things you never saw before.
Yeah.
People always react to things that I never planned on people reacting to, and it's like it's a delight. So no, not scared. Very much like excited to see how the audience reacts and what ride they go on, because it's totally different than what I'm doing.
Patrick, you look like you.
I was going to say, yeah, it's not all bad, you know, but that pain that I was talking about is like, there are like specks of joy. And I think one thing that's nice is with genre movies, it allows those specks of joy, because like what other, you're not going to necessarily get that out of like a drama, you know, or whatever, where you're going to get like an audible reaction from an audience when there's a moment that people are excited by. So, and
it's great in LA because people here, like the moviegoers here, I mean, people will be like, what the, you know, they're just yelling at the screen, and it's great.
Love the LA movie crowd. Alrighty, let's say how do you balance your artistic vision and then also answering to your producers?
I mean, I would say it starts with finding producers who you trust and you know are going to support you throughout the process. You know, and that just goes back to your intuition that we were talking about before. And I think I think getting a sense of someone early on and trusting that things are you're going to be with someone who supports you is great. But it's a different thing when you're in the muck of making a movie and you're having to make really hard decisions. And I got to say, I've been really lucky that, like, everyone that's produced a movie that I've worked on a movie with, I've known for at least a year, or had spent time with them before I got into the process of making a movie with them, and so that certainly helped. Eliminate surprises, when things did get really hard.
I also feel like getting feedback is a really emotional process, and my purely from a self-survival standpoint process has been, I like to get off notes calls as fast as possible, and it's not that no one's wrong, no one's saying anything incorrect necessarily, but when you're making something, you're so in it, and if someone's like, "What if that thing was green instead of red?" You're like, "What the fuck?" You're like, you're so wound tight, and I have to just like get it. Thank you for your feedback. I'm gonna take this back. I'm gonna think about it, and let's chat.
Don't give all our tools. They're recording, JD. Like,
look,
come
we
on.
have some tricks, okay?
Everyone needs to feel heard. Yeah.
Make people feel heard, but like, you have to go home with it. You're the one that's going to live with it. Your name is on it definitively. And, you have to like absorb what that meant. And look, not everything is right, not everything is helpful, but half the time there is truth within it. There's truth behind it. There's something to actually interrogate behind it. And I am very much like, stay the vision, this is what I meant to do. And then 90% of the time, 3 days after I got a no, I was like, oh, yeah, okay, I probably should do something like that. So it's just taking the emotion out of the process and absorbing it for a bit.
Absolutely. That's some great notes on feedback. What do you do on
Breakfast
the morning
burrito.
production?
Yoga.
Burrito.
CBD.
Are we doing one word
Hey,
answer?
you got, what's yours?
Isolate.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to look at you. Don't come to me. I'm just kidding. But no, honestly, isolate for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And green tea, more tangibly.
That's a good one. And that was what you do on the mornings of production, kind of center.
I think for me, I really take a lot of time choosing the group of people that I'm making the film with. And if I get to a place where I'm lost or I'm feeling like out of touch, it doesn't happen a lot, but when it does, I ask them to kind of step in and remind me. These people, like these folks that I get to make things with, are incredible, and they really are. We're all in it together in such a way that if one person has a down day or like one person is like not hitting that day, like you're there to kind of remind them, pick them up. Like that's usually what I turn to. I really, really rely a lot on my collaborators. Like they give me a lot of inspiration because they all have amazing ideas, and it's just like they really give me like life. So
Yeah. And this is, what strategies are you using during hard times and times of rejection?
I have an editing professor from NYU named Carol Dysinger, who is also an award-winning editor, really smart woman, who told us one day in class, I never forgot this, you make good shit by saying no to bad shit. It sounds so simple, but knowing the kind of work that you want to make, to me, is a major first step. But in order to understand that, you have to know yourself. You have to know what you gravitate to. You cannot dictate what you create based on industry trends or life trends. And I think that's getting increasingly more challenging as we navigate this social media world where everything is so immediate and accessible, and you're being inundated with what you should be caring about, right? You're being manipulated and conditioned. So having something internal that blocks out all the external manipulation and is some sort of center internally that gravitates to certain types of work. I'm building my canon right now. I'm saying a lot of no's to a lot of things. I mean, I probably would have had a film, my second feature by now, but my name is on this, and I don't want to be set up for failure. So deciding if you're willing to be a little more patient and say yes, but also, we all have bills. Nobody your mortgage or your rent doesn't care about curating a body of work, which is why I'm still teaching. But not only that, teaching allows me to be honest. It forces me to sharpen my craft, because the things that I'm telling my students, I need to hold myself accountable as a filmmaking professor. So being in academia, having one leg in academia and one leg in the industry, allows me to say a lot of no's that I don't think I would be able to say if I was solely relying on checks from Hollywood.
About
Those are
breaking
two
in.
good questions.
That's a great question. I mean, one thing I would say is there's a misconception or a myth in this town about starting in the mailroom and working up as a filmmaker, or starting as an assistant and working up. That's not to say that being an assistant can't be like an amazing learning experience. I was an assistant to a film producer who was making an independent film, and it was through that lens that I got to see the process of making a movie and got to sort of listen to my own instincts and hear decisions being made that I agreed with or that I didn't agree with, and it was through that process that I sort of, and I still take that experience with me, when I make stuff now. But I would say, as much as you can, if find what you want to do. And there are so many different ways and avenues into this world, not just directing, that's the cool thing about making movies is it involves, there's not another art form that involves so many disciplines, And so it's finding something that you're good at, which could include bookkeeping, you know what I mean? I had a student who was asking me about making a short film, and I was like, and he's saying he needs a producer or someone to help him with, and I was like, are any of your friends good at Excel spreadsheets? Or do any of your friends love to organize their lives? Those are the type of people who make amazing producers.
Seriously.
And just take your friend who's a BA or an MBA, or whatever, and force them to make your movie with you. And that's one of the cool things about the making movies too, is that you can be interested in everything, and that there's a way in for everyone. So I would say don't feel like there's one set path, and that it's that way or the highway.
I think that's a misconception, is that there's one answer to that question, which I know is not super helpful, but in a way should be freeing, because there really is. I know a lot of directors now, and I don't know a single one that came up the same way I did, or each other. So it's even tonight we've told you very different stories. And so it does come down to if you already know what you think you want to do, great, you have a path. For me, I did every job on set. So I was always too scared to admit I wanted to direct, until finally it just I couldn't handle it anymore. But by doing that, I was experimenting in all sorts of fashions and kind of still getting to be a part of the process, but in different ways. So everyone gets there in a different way. And I think if you just are I think for me, persistence has been the biggest key.
The question was about the close-ups and to create tension and all the different techniques that you used during that. What was that?
That's a great question. I shot it a long time ago now, it feels like. So I'm what did we do? I know for that scene there was a lot that we were building up to. If you guys didn't get it, she passes out after that. And the one thing in that room, which is a set, by the way, that we built, is the painting that's in the room that she's looking at was sort of another character in the scene for me. So that was in terms of where I was placing the camera in the room. I wanted to be always with her, and so it's why I'm really tight on her for the whole thing. But as she starts to get, more sort of drugged up, we kind of almost get slightly tighter on her. And then with him, obviously, we built these special lenses to sort of morph his image in camera from her POV. But it really was about being with her and being with her experience. If anyone has unfortunately had the experience of being drugged or being roofied, not to get super dark, I have, and so I was trying to emulate that experience that I had and the feeling of being just everything's large, everything's kind of bigger than life, but also you kind of are losing scope of distance. So I don't know if I answered that, but that was
Definitely. With the hour perception of success, what are those daily
How long you got?
struggles that you all
Should I
are
be paying you
facing?
guys tonight?
I feel like, there's this weird thing that happens in this town where people sort of only remember you for the last thing you did. And, I am exclusively a genre filmmaker. And then I made one not genre movie. And people are like, would you also like to do the story about the first black firefighter, the first black police officer, the first black... And you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. And the reactivity is so persistent that, I think, at least for me, I found that I really have to keep my finger on what I want to do. because it's very easy for the town to start to tell you what you're supposed to do or what they think you should do, or they're not even thinking about you and they're like, here's what you should do. But if it's not starting with you, it's very easy to just like, okay, well, this is a Go movie about the first black firefighter, and maybe I should just do, But and it's opportunity is already so hard. Making anything is such a miracle that devil on your shoulder is very loud, very quick. I mean, success or not, I can't even measure it by that metric. But after something is out and the success of being finished with something, you immediately feel the sort of reactive nature of that thing you just made.
Well said.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm constantly reassessing what success is. And I think it's important to be fluid in that and not hold on to this biblical notion that you manifested at 12 of what success is, and because the longer you hold on to that, the more that you're not allowing yourself to stay present and really live. And the best material for writing is living. Because you can always tell when a filmmaker is constantly paying homage and not actually having a full life, intentionally finding experiences, traveling, just making your friends major landmarks in their lives. Like, this is something that I'm reassessing now because I've had my head down for a really long time. And I'm reaching a point where I'm now, again, redefining what success looks like to me. And for me, it's freedom. It's freedom to not be tethered to a system that commoditizes your passion and makes you forget why you even fell in love with the craft in the first place. So I'm constantly reassessing. I think that's the short version of the answer, but just living, finding ways. Now money is a means to the experiences that I need to make me a better human being, not just a better filmmaker, a better human being.
Yeah. If you can name one aha moment that led you on the path to where you are right now, what would that be? Yeah, that's a thoughtful one.
I think. Oh no.
I was just thinking, I had a kind of a moment early on because, you make a movie and then everyone goes, she's overnight, and I'm like, no, I've been doing this for 10, 12, 13, 14 years. But when I made my first music video, I studied film in college, didn't go to a film school though, so it was all very theoretical. But when I made my first music video, I was living in San Francisco. We made it for $5,000, and we shot for 4 days, which was all very illegal. I mean, we just really, there were no rules. But I just remember feeling, and I had already been a producer. I had worked in the camera department, art department, and I remember feeling like having my whole crew around me and being like, oh, like this is freedom, because I suddenly felt the machine working in this way that was so beautiful. It's when stuff's moving on set the way it's supposed to. It's like a choreographed. I mean, you're part of like a symphony, and it's just you cannot replicate it, and it's why we become addicted to this. But I think that was for me when I was like, oh, like with all of these people, this is the thing. This is what I'm now like going after. So that was mine.
Amazing. Any other aha moments?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I don't know how it is for you guys, but it's, I wanted to make movies because I was inspired as a movie goer. And I think sitting and watching a finished film, like there couldn't be anything more different than the actual chaotic process of making a movie, And so I don't think I knew I loved movies, and I knew it was something I wanted to be a part of, but I don't know if I truly understood what I was getting myself into until I was on set, figuring that out. And I think for me, the aha, at least, I've had a series of aha moments. I had an aha moment on my first film, which was a documentary that I made while I was still in film school when I went to France as part of an exchange program to go make a movie. And I was on a set with a small French film crew. I was the only American there. And I was seeing an image that I had thought of in my head articulated in real life. It was happening. And I was so excited, you know? And I feel really lucky because I feel like I've had moments like that on every movie that I've worked on where, you know, you spend years thinking of these things, and then there's that one day when you're on a movie set where you have all these moving parts and, you know, everything is synchronized in that perfect way, and you're seeing it happen, this thing that you thought of, you know, months or years ago, happening in real life with all these beautiful people, and it's real, you know, and you're capturing it, and you're literally putting it in a bottle, and you know, it's that feeling is so addicting, and it is absolutely the thing that supersedes all the other difficult stuff that we're talking about here is that feeling, you know.
I think my aha is kind of related in that, you know, it's very easy to watch movies and be like, clearly this visionary filmmaker like thought of every frame and that's what they got and that's what the movie is. And then, you know, as I worked for directors and, you know, got to visit sets that weren't my own, you realize like, oh, the actual, like, not the hack, but like the magic trick is that they are acting on instinct live, and they can look at a frame and they're like, you know what, this has been in my head for months, but that's not it. But they're following their instinct, and they're going to move the camera here, and they're going to push those actors back, and they're going to bring that piece of set dressing forward, and then they find it, and then like, and now that's the iconic thing in the movie, you know. But I remember on Sleight, like at my first movie, I just was so obsessed with having to be like, all right, I'm going to walk in the set, I'm going to say, actor you stand there, actor you stand there, camera's here, roll, cut, great, we got it. Like, and there was no play. It was just like execution on this vision that I thought had to be like unassailable and immovable. And then once I realized it was just about like staying in the spirit and flow of it, I was like, oh, like now the movie can breathe, and now I'm finding things, and there was no discovery. I mean, you know, love Sleight, but there's no discovery in that process. It was just executing what I thought I had to do.
Don't wait.
Oh gosh,
Wait.
How do I rephrase this?
You really only
have
need to
different opinion.
have a magical connection to your department heads. G&E hated me on my set. I had a bunch of good old boys in G&E, and they did not like me. Okay, and I didn't like them. But guess what? They had one job, and I did too. So you really just need the people who inform your DP, your production designer, your editor. Like you decide where you want the magic, and everybody else is there to serve that magic. Because if you keep waiting for every cylinder to fire off magically, you will be waiting for the rest of your life.
Yeah, just want to repeat the essence of that of a question.
Sorry.
Oh no, that was amazing. Repeating the essence of that question of yes or no, just going for it, or kind of like waiting until you've got that, like maybe like that perfect crew, perfect cast, you know.
I would agree on part of that, which is that there's never going to be a perfect time. Yeah. It's like people who are like, should I have a kid? I don't know. That's not the thing. I do feel like making a film is having a baby, but that's another conversation. You're never going to have all the things you want. So I think it's about weighing. Yeah. Do I want to keep waiting, or do I have enough of the pieces that I can then get it there once we start? You know, I think that you'll know in your gut if it's all wrong, then yeah, wait a little bit. But if you've been at it for a long time and you are like, oh, this is some momentum. Momentum is good. You need to follow that momentum, and it might end up leading you somewhere else you didn't know that's even better. So I think, yeah, I don't know your specific situation, but you will know if it's right or not. If it's fear that's getting in the way of, okay, I have an opportunity to do this. It's not exactly what I wanted, but Fear, you have to push that door down. You just have to, because you'll always regret it if you don't.
Also, not to diminish the effort ever in front of us, but I think the other thing that I've needed to do, also just for survival, you're going to make more things, and before I had made more things, I was always like, man, like, should I do it today? And then you realize that the life of being a maker is just starting, finishing, starting, finishing, starting, finishing. And the more pressure you put on yourself on the starting because of all the, the cosmic weight of will it work out exactly the way that I want, even as a writer, the way I've been able to just like not want to die doing my job is, there are always like 5 things that I really care about, because it'll never be up to me. Even as things have gotten slightly incrementally easier in my career, I've never chosen what I shoot next because it's such this strange alchemy of tax incentive in Budapest and this actor's available and, all of the elections, all of these things that have nothing to do with you will always be in the mix. So if there's something that can launch it, because those moments are fleeting. And if it doesn't launch, you'll turn to your left and you'll launch that thing instead, But I think it's forward momentum always.
Yeah, you can always start down the road and then you can always stop if it's not what you want.
Yeah, and if there are serious red flags, acknowledge them,
Definitely.
Don't lie to yourself, is that part of the process? But man, it's such a miracle anything gets made ever. So, if you do have the opportunity to do it, do it.
Amazing. Well, before I hand it back to Paul, thank you all so much.